Malik Washington is a top returning QB in the Big Ten.
You are Locked On Terps, your daily podcast on the Maryland Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tre Moore, host of Locked On Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So thank you guys all for making us part of your day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. And if you're a new customer, bet just $5 and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Maryland's Malik Washington, I think, is one of the top returning quarterbacks in the Big 10. And it's time to have this conversation. I kind of did my research on kind of the returning guys just to refresh my memory. I know you guys know a lot of the different players that are returning in the Big 10 at quarterback, but I had to look at a couple just to get a better idea. And I think Malik Washington, and you guys might have different opinions on this. We'll see who ends up watching it. I think he's one of the best returners in the Big Ten and is going to have one of the best seasons out of anybody in the Big Ten next year at quarterback for Maryland football. When we talk about Malik Washington, I think there's a couple things that are true about Malik Washington. You can just look at the stats from last year and be like, okay, this is pretty good for a freshman. He was two-time Big Ten Freshman of the Week. He was on the Sean Alexander Freshman of the Year watch list, started all 12 games for Maryland as a true freshman, threw for nearly 3,000 yards and 17 touchdowns, and ranked top 5 in the Big Ten in completions and passing yards per game at 246.9. He has the school record for freshman completions. Like, you can look at the stats and be like, yeah, Malik Washington could zip the ball around, but you could say there's also a lot of places for him to improve. But when you watch the games, you could see there's something that is like you can't teach, and it's just the ability to make some throws that not everybody can make. It's something that you just can't teach. Either have it or you don't. I was talking about this with my friend the other day. It's like they call it kind of like the NFL throws, an NFL type of arm. Like, you think of guys like Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, like guys like that just their arms are just different. And it's not something you can necessarily, I know you can get better in technique a little bit, but most of it, I would say like 80% of it is just talent. And then you can't really train it that much. Like, lifting and things like that doesn't necessarily actually just make you a better or make your arm stronger. Like, you either have it or you don't. And we saw Malik Washington make throws that are legitimate throws that could happen on Sundays, could happen in the NFL. And he makes passes throughout the season where you're like, that's one of the better throws I've ever seen a quarterback make in college football, or that's one of the cooler plays I've seen a Maryland quarterback make in my time watching Maryland football. Like, you guys watched Billy Edwards, you watched Talia. I know Talia was really good at kind of getting the ball where it needed to be, but there were throws that Malik Washington made, and you could say the same thing for Billy Edwards. There were throws that Malik Washington would make that you're like, neither one of those guys are making these types of throws. And I think he also needs to work on some of the easy stuff, getting his completion percentage up, but that's what's supposed to happen in your sophomore jump. Your biggest jump you make in college athletics, they say, is from your freshman to your sophomore year. And so I'm looking at Malik Washington, and I'm looking at the returners in the Big Ten and the guys coming in, and I think that you could argue Malik Washington as a top 5 quarterback heading into the Big Ten next year, maybe even like a top 4 type of guy. I would say this. I'll give you Julian Sayin at Ohio State and Tre Moore at Oregon. Those two guys were as good as anybody, and will be two guys that I think Tre Moore could have went 2 in this year's NFL draft. I'm still not 100% sure why he ended up returning. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. I know some people say it's because he didn't want to go to the Jets. Some people say he thinks he can go number 1 next year, different things like that. But if you look at next year's quarterback class, it's stacked. So I think it was a risky play for Dante Moore to go back to school, but that's what he ended up doing. That's what he ended up wanting to do. So he's one of the top returning quarterbacks in the Big Ten, absolutely. And I'll say Julian Sayin, I mean, he led Ohio State to an undefeated year. I know they arguably had the most talented team in the country and ended up coming short, but I still think that Julian Sayin, he showed flashes of being elite. But I want to add something on. Those are probably your top two guys in the conference, but I want to add something on. I don't necessarily think that Dante or Julian are necessarily like much more talented than Malik Washington. I think pure talent, not talking about stats or production, I think it's pretty similar. Like I don't think like Julian Sayin has a 10 times better arm than Malik Washington, or Dante Moore has a much better arm than Malik Washington. I think they're pretty similar in terms of talent. I think Malik can actually move more than Dante Moore. I think that he definitely can move better than Dante Moore. I think he moves similarly to Julian Sayin. I just think those guys have much better supporting cast. So I do want to say I'll put those two guys ahead of Malik Washington, but I think he's in that pool talent-wise. Like if you substitute them, you'll look at Malik Washington and you'll be like, oh, that's a first-round pick. You guys know what I mean? So I think he is still in terms of pure talent, still in the first class in terms of the Big Ten, but we're talking about best returning, and talent's not everything. And so I put those two guys up there. I'd also put Damon Williams up there from Washington. I thought for a second there was a thing: is he going to Miami? Is he going to LSU? And then Washington was going to take legal action. Like there's a whole thing going on with Damon Williams, but other than that, he's really good QB, and I think he's one of the better returning ones in the Big Ten. And I think I would put him up there with Julian Sayin and Dante Moore, maybe like a touch below those guys, but I think he's really good. And those are kind of probably my three that I think are going to be the best ones. And then from there is where I see Malik Washington. Like if I put it in class, I would put Julian Sayin, Dante Moore, and maybe you could argue Damon Williams could be in that. And then I think there's the next kind of group of guys who I think Rocco Becht, for the kid that's going to Penn State, could fit in. Bryce Underwood could fit in because of his talent. I think Malik Washington fits in, and I think Malik Washington headlines this next class. I think I would take him. I think I would take him above Rocco Becht. I know Rocco Becht played a lot of college football and has been really good in college football, but the thing is, Rocco Becht, it's kind of that thing where we go back to the talent. There's plays that Rocco can't make that Malik Washington can with his legs and his arm, and Rocco Becht's going to be really efficient, but Malik Washington's going to give you a higher ceiling. And then Bryce Underwood last year, I know Bryce Underwood's supremely talented, but let's be honest, we saw those two freshmen, and I think most people would say kind of when you put the whole math equation together and you look at Michigan's team versus Maryland's team, I thought Malik Washington looked better than Bryce Underwood did last year, just when you calculate everything. And so I would say that he's above those couple of guys and kind of at that 4-ish spot in terms of returning guys in the Big Ten and how they project for next year. I think Nico, also the UCLA kid, could be kind of there. And then other than that, you get I don't know, is Hank Brown starting for Iowa? I think there's some other guys that are potentially going to be starters, but I don't see those guys as top returning guys. Oh, then I forgot the kid Josh Hoover from Indiana as well. You could, I think, put in that category, but I'll still take Malik Washington over him. I know Hoover's good. I know Rocco Becht's good, but I think in terms of my opinion, I'd put Malik Washington 4 in the Big Ten, and I didn't think I would come out with a formal ranking. I think Dante Moore, you have to say, is probably 1. I think you could say Julian Sayin's 2 or Damon Williams 3. And then I'll put Malik Washington 4. And then after that, you guys can have your discussions with Bryce Underwood and Rocco Becht, kind of 5, 6 for me. Nico right there. Same with Josh Hoover. But I'll put Malik Washington 4. And I think he's going to have that type of year where he surprises a lot of people and ends up being one of the best Big Ten quarterbacks. And his junior year, if he decides to stick it out with Maryland, we're talking about him being one of the guys that could potentially go pretty early on in the NFL draft, which I think is possible for the kid. But that's kind of my rankings. Maryland basketball loses a really bad game, loses pretty badly again. And I didn't want to start with it, but we're going to talk about it. Let's talk about Maryland basketball after this. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is a Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel's making sure you're right in the middle of it with the special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is the game where predictions turn into plays, stats turns into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's a perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So Maryland football, or Maryland basketball, I should say. I keep doing that. Maryland basketball just got demolished against Ohio State, and nobody seemed to care too much when I started with Maryland basketball. It sounds like you guys are pretty done with it, and I'm pretty done with it too, but it's my job to talk about it, and it was definitely disappointing to watch. I mean, I think we all could have seen it coming. We're just not very good, and you guys all know that, so I'm not going to sit here and talk about that for an hour, not being very good. I think Ohio State, were kind of like what we expected. Like when you look at the stat sheets, when you look at what they did, it's what we expected. And it just brings me to the kind of those same points that I was making before. Like, is the scout good enough? Like, we knew John Mobley was going to be a shooter. Final score is 82-62, as most of you guys probably knew. We knew John Mobley was going to be a shooter. And he goes 5 of 9 from the three-point arc, gets a lot of good open looks, and has 15 points and hits most of the threes for Ohio State. A big reason why we couldn't stay in the game. We knew Bruce Thornton's game. We knew he was going to get in the paint. It was going to be inside the three-point arc. Couldn't really stop him. And then the kid, Christoph Tilley, had a really good game as well. And so you look at it and you're like, okay. You look at what Ohio State did versus what Maryland did, where we got beat. There's a couple different places. I mean, we turn over the ball a ton. We had 16 turnovers. We're not beating anybody turning over the ball 16 times. It just ain't going to happen. 16 turnovers is just too many. And compared to Ohio State's 8 turnovers, like that's low-key the game right there. It's not like either half we got absolutely demolished, but when you lose by 10 each half, you end up losing by 20. And so the turnovers, if you get those down to 10, you might be looking at a different game and understand how to guard Bruce Thornton or understand how John Mobley wants to beat you. You might have a better game. Like, that's just kind of how I see it. I don't know if people would agree with that, but I think if you get the turnovers down, it's hard to argue that we wouldn't be more in the game. Like, I think 10 is a reasonable mark for Maryland basketball to be at. But when the other team plays pretty mistake-free and only gives up 8 and we give up 16, like, you're just not really going to win the game. And then I thought there was a couple people that did play really well, though, for Maryland basketball. Like, I thought, or a couple people, yeah. Elijah Sanders, I thought, honestly, had a really good rebounding game. And this is what I mean. We have no idea. Like, every single game, I have no idea in the lineup. There's going to be one guy that probably plays well, and the rest of the team is going to be pretty inefficient. And tonight it was Elijah Sanders, and he had 20 points, 3 of 6 from the three-point line. He shot the ball really well, had a really good game, showed his stretch 4 or 5 ability, whatever you want to call him on this team, since we're pretty small. And he looked good doing it in 28 minutes for Maryland basketball. Also snagged 4 rebounds and 2 assists. So I thought he had a really good game. And then other than that, I thought Solomon Washington had himself a pretty good game, but Solomon Washington also had 3 turnovers and didn't shoot the ball well from 3, which definitely didn't help, but he did have 13 points and played almost every minute. I do like this, and I'll say this is one of the bigger takeaways. I've been talking about the young guys. How do those guys look? Andre Mills, man, I thought he looked pretty good again. Was pretty efficient, 11 points, 4 of 8 from the field, 2 of 5 from the three-point arc. Like, we'll take 40% every single time. He turned over the ball once. I liked what Andre Mills showed. I thought he had a really solid game. And so he had that dunk too. That dunk, like, I'm telling you, he's a freakish athlete. He can move. He's strong. He can jump. The talent's there. And if he continues to shoot decently well from the three-point arc and continues to work on his offensive game, he can be good next year for Maryland basketball. And there's a jump to be made for Andre Mills. It's just really about him putting together the pieces and him figuring it out. But he's there. Like, it's right there for the taking for him. And we also started a different starting lineup as well, which I thought was interesting. Colin Metcalf at the 5, Solomon Washington at the 3, Elijah Sanders at the 4, Andre Mills and Darius Adams kind of headlining the lineup. Darius Adams didn't do too much. He also didn't take very many shots. Would love to see him get more shots, but he did have 4 turnovers, which is way too many. Off the bench, Diggy Coy, I mean, he's just been very inefficient from 3 ever since his couple of big games. 1 of 7 from 3-point line, 4 of 10 overall. But other than that, there's just very limited bench production. Miles Rice didn't even play. And then Isaiah Watts only had 3 points. Like, it just wasn't there for Maryland basketball, and against an Ohio State team that didn't necessarily shoot. Like, this is Ohio State team that it's a game you feel like you could have stayed in. Didn't necessarily shoot a ton of threes, like made 8, which is the same amount that we made. We did take a good amount more, but it's not like they were just killing us from the three-point arc. Like, besides John Mobley Jr., they really weren't doing too much shooting. And the kid that came off the bench, the Chapman kid, they weren't doing too much kind of shooting. But the thing that I thought was going to happen that honestly didn't really end up happening for Maryland basketball at all. I thought we were going to get out-rebounded. We ended up out-rebounding Ohio State. So the kind of formula was there in some ways for us to keep it close, but they're just better than us efficiently, especially inside the 2-point arc. They're really solid, and that was part of the scout, is that John Mobley's really their only like elite shooter, but they do have guys that can get to the bucket, can get to the mid-range, and make some plays happen. And that's what we saw in their big 3. Tilly, Thornton, Mobley all played pretty well. And so they definitely had a balanced scoring attack from those couple of guys, whereas we're still kind of all over the place. Hard to figure out what we want to do. And so it's just not a good game for Maryland basketball. We head to 1-10 in the Big Ten record. And at this point, I saw an article, we're fighting to not have the worst Maryland season ever. That's what we're playing for at this point. And I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if that's a I don't know what's going to happen, and I had to look what the record is, but right now that's what we're fighting for. But we do have a really winnable game on Sunday against a Minnesota team that is kind of on their high horse after winning a couple games. But I do think, or winning a game against Michigan State, but I do think we'll have the opportunity to maybe beat them. But we'll talk about that next after this. This is Mazda moving the game forward. And for those who show up, there's more to score than what's on the screen. Similar to Andre Mills, he showed up every single game for Maryland basketball with tippy-top effort. He's a freakish athlete. He's worked on his skills, and you can see the potential that he has in the improvement that he has made. And these remind us of what it really takes to raise the bar. It's that extra work off the court, and Andre Mills is a great example of doing that. Dialing in every detail, giving it that extra fire, that grit, and I never quit. We put the same passion into every model. Highlights make the reel. What it took to get there makes it count. And there's more to Mazda because there's more to you. So it is Friday, and Maryland basketball does have another game on Sunday. So I wanted to finish today talking about Minnesota and Maryland's matchup against Minnesota, 2 o'clock on Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday. Let me know what you guys think about the Super Bowl. Who do you guys have? I'm sure there won't be too many people looking at this Maryland game, but we do have an opportunity to win a Big Ten game, which has been a rare occurrence this year. And we play a Minnesota team that is actually really interesting after just beating one of the best teams in the country. I think Michigan State is a little bit overrated. I just don't think they're like super like offensively talented, but that's besides kind of what we're here to talk about. Here to talk about Minnesota. They just beat Michigan State 76-73. Michigan State team that's really good. 19-4 overall, 9-3 in the Big Ten. They've been one of the better teams all year in terms of the Big Ten, but also overall. But this Minnesota team, kind of similar to us, not as bad as us. They're struggling to win games. They've won some, but they're 11-12 overall. They're 4-8 in the Big Ten. But I would still say they're better than us. Like I'd still say they're the better team than us. And they showed up against Michigan State, and they showed some care, and they shot the three ball really well. They shot 48% from the three-point arc, as well as they didn't really turn over the ball, 6 turnovers. And as a team, that's how you win games when you're the underdog. You shoot the ball well and you don't turn over the ball. When you look at March Madness upsets, when you look at some of the big upsets, that's what happens in games. And Maryland basketball doesn't really have that type of team where I would expect us to shoot the three ball really well, but you never know what can happen, and then also not turn over the ball. But if you look at Minnesota, if you want to know how to beat a team, how to stay with a team, that's how you do it in college basketball and basketball in general. If you don't turn over the ball and you shoot the three ball pretty well, like you're probably going to be in every single game. But they came off this huge win against Michigan State. So you kind of wonder, okay, could they potentially be not even looking over Maryland? Because I don't think this is a team that's looking over anyone just because they haven't been very good. But could they potentially be a team that we look at as or could they potentially be a team that we look at kind of they're still kind of riding their high horse and a team that we could potentially beat? And I think it's possible. I think they're a good team, but I don't think they're much better than we are. I definitely would say they're better, but it's not like some of the talent gap that we've seen so far this year. They have a couple of really good players. This kid, Cade Tyson at guard, averages 19 points for them, nearly 20 points actually, and shoots the ball really well. And we'll see. It seems like good players have been able to go off on us rather easily, but this kid shoots 45% from the three-point arc. He gets 5 rebounds a game. He averages 20 points per game. Definitely a guy that we're going to be looking at. Could be really good against Maryland basketball. I think he could be one of the main guys that kind of defines the game. And they have this kid, Jalen Crooker Johnson, as well, who's more of a forward, 6'8". Hopefully Solomon Washington can kind of lock him down a little bit, but he was really good against Michigan State, 22 points, big reason they won, 50% from the three-point arc. So he was one of the high performers against Michigan State. And then they have a couple other guys, but yeah, Cade Tyson, I want to go back to him. He had 17 points against Michigan State, so definitely a solid player. And they have another guard, this kid Langston Reynolds, 6'4" senior. They got some experience to them for sure. He had 14 points against Michigan State. Like, they have guys that can score the ball, and I would say they're definitely deeper than us, better all around, but I don't think they're like insanely talented. It's kind of similar as the Ohio State thing. I expect Maryland to not be double-digit underdogs against Minnesota. Maybe we are, but I would think we aren't after not being against Ohio State. I would say Ohio State is probably better. They're better record than this team, but I think they're similar in terms of what they bring. A couple of guys that are really good at the top, some experienced guys that have been there for a little bit, that have done it. But I think it's an opportunity for Maryland to maybe get in the win category. Maybe. Like, probably not. Like, let's be honest, but there's a chance there for Maryland to get in the win category. So we'll see what happens with Maryland, but I think there's a chance for them to do some good things, but we'll see exactly. But that's all we have for today. Thank you guys all for listening to Locked On Terps. Make sure you guys all like and subscribe. We're here every day talking Maryland football and basketball. So thank you guys for listening to Locked On Terps.